Hello and welcome to Real Juicy News. I got some very extraordinary, bizarre news for you today. This little news report might floor you. Okay, it reads COVID-19 vaccine passports almost an inevitability within next year, says Chris Hipkins. I believe this is the guy here. COVID-19 vaccine passports will be almost an inevitability within the next year, according to COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins. The COVID-19 Response Minister said everyone in New Zealand will not necessarily need to be vaccinated before allowing in people from overseas. However, New Zealand's actively involved in the conversations around vaccine passports, he told Q&A this morning. I think vaccine passports are almost an inevitability at some point in the future, and probably the not too distant future. I think that's likely to happen. A vaccinated passport is a way of people being able to easily show and prove they've been vaccinated for COVID-19, usually discussed in the context of overseas travel. In the UK, it's also being discussed as a possibility to require the vaccine passport for visiting busy domestic locations too, such as the gym or a restaurant. Hipkins said while there is a lot of water to flow under the bridge, very quickly he believes the vaccine passport is highly likely to be something people will need to get within next year. Vaccines will need to be available to everyone before requiring a vaccine passport to travel can be mandatory, he added. You couldn't say to someone you can't travel until you had a vaccine if that person couldn't get a vaccine, Hipkins said. However, he said they may not require everyone in New Zealand to be vaccinated before people from overseas get into the country. Law expert warns COVID-19 vaccination passports might lead to discrimination for some. He said studies carried out overseas are within the wider global context of widespread community transmission, and in New Zealand that's not the context. Very few countries are in the position New Zealand's in, so if you look at other research they're doing on transmission of the virus to air conditioning systems, very few countries are in the position New Zealand's in. So if you look at other research they're doing on transmission of the virus to air conditioning systems, no one else is looking at that because no one else really cares, he said. In the context of person-to-person spread being the biggest transmitter, they're not looking at their conditioning systems as we are. He said New Zealand could have quite different border settings to the ones we have now, as vaccines are rolled out across the globe and there is a greater understanding of what that means in terms of transmissibility of the vaccine. As we get to a position where vaccines are part of the global picture, that will probably have an impact on our border as we can open up safe travel areas with other countries, Australia, the Pacific. We will absolutely be doing that. All of those things are happening. There's a bit of uncertainty around all of those as well because there's uncertainty around vaccines, but we're working hard to try and give that certainty. While on Q&A this morning, the Minister also confirmed that there were no new COVID-19 cases to report in the community overnight. The formal update by the Ministry of Health is due at 1 p.m. Wait for it. Okay. Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, who Director General? So he's the Director General of the World Health Organization. So are they like planning this from afar, from the organisation, and New Zealand's getting in on it as well as the UK? Okay, we have a listen to what this guy has to say.
And weeks ahead, we expect to see the number of cases, the number of deaths, and the number of affected countries climb even higher.
That was WHO Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus declaring a global pandemic a year ago this week. Chris Hipkins is the Minister for the COVID-19 response and is with us now. Can you believe that was a year ago, Minister?
Well,
Well, on one level it feels like a lot longer than a year ago, and on another level it doesn't feel like a year at all.
Have we had any new cases overnight?
No new community cases overnight. As always, there's likely to be some additional cases in our managed isolation of people who've just come into the country, but no new community cases reported overnight.
Okay. I want to start with some stuff from this week and then move on to the big picture. So two of the people to have tested positive in the latest outbreak, we understand, had spent time at work. Under the leave support scheme, people who are isolating after being tested are only eligible for a sum less than the minimum wage. If, from this point, you want people to be staying home once they've been tested for COVID-19, if they have any symptoms, regardless of the alert levels, why don't you pay them more?
Look, the leave support scheme was never designed to be a complete wage replacement for people who are staying home. It's designed to be an additional financial support. When we set that scheme up, I think it's been well canvassed over the last week, when we set that scheme up, the context was quite different. We were potentially looking at having thousands of people needing to access that scheme. The reality is now it's smaller, and we always have a look at that. We're not proposing any changes at this point, or I should say, we've not made any decisions on any changes at this point. I never rule that out for the future, but at this point, it is what it is.
But why not? I mean that's the point, right? Well, fewer people are requiring this scheme than when you originally set it up, which of course means that overall it's cheaper.
I think you need to look at the leave support scheme in the context of quite a lot of additional financial support that's being provided by government at the moment. The wage subsidy, the resurgence payments, the leave support scheme. There are a variety of different levels of financial support that are available at the moment, which come at a significant cost to the taxpayer, and ultimately that's money that the taxpayer in the future is going to have to pay back because it's being funded by a government borrower. So we do have to balance up all of those things. The government's ability to continue to put money out there is not unlimited.
No.
Ultimately we will have to pay money back at some point in the future.
Oh, of course, we understand this is expensive, but of course we've spent billions of dollars supporting business through the wage subsidy scheme. We understand that the alert level 3 lockdown in Auckland has cost our economy the best part of $500 million. Isn't it actually the financially prudent thing to do to ensure that anyone who is staying home is being paid at least the minimum wage?
But we're also asking employers to play their part here as well. That's part of the quid pro quo with us saying, look, we'll provide the wage subsidy, we'll provide the resurgence payments. But when you have staff who need to stay home, yes, we're providing additional support for that as well. But actually, the cumulative effect of that is that we want businesses and employers to be playing their part and making sure that they're properly supporting their staff who are staying home too.
Is the government making, through its contact tracing, making it totally clear to people that disclosures made for the purposes of contact tracing will not be have any impact on immigration status or welfare status?
Absolutely, and you will have heard me say that many times in the public press conferences. Immigration New Zealand will not be given any information that is obtained through contact tracing. In fact, any information we obtain through contact tracing we use only for contact tracing, and as soon as we no longer need that, it is destroyed. So we do not keep that any longer than we need it for.
Who gives people that message?
They're given that message by the people who are doing the contact tracing. I've reiterated that message publicly as many times as I possibly can as well. But certainly that information is supplied through the interview process. The interview process is quite extensive and it's quite personal. We get a lot of information about people, about their lives, and we do have to share some of that, but we try only to share the parts of it that we have to. So when people are sharing information about personal contact with other people, for example, if we can track down that other person and there's no public interest need for everyone to know about that, we don't share that information because as long as we can find that person and we can isolate them and test them if we need to, not everyone needs to know about that. Now, that means that we get a lot of questions about where people have been and who they've been in contact with, some of which we're able to answer publicly and some of which we're not. But we ultimately want people to come forward and share as much information as they can.
We just spoke with the chair of Sky City and Tourism Holdings, who's seeking more clarity from the government as to some of our plans and the government plans from this point forth. Can you give us more detail as to our vaccine rollout plan? We understand that border workers and their families and frontline health workers will be the first to be vaccinated. Who comes next?
I just wanted, before perhaps I could respond to a couple of the comments made there first. I think the business are looking for a couple of things for us. One is more certainty, and some of that we can give, and some of that we simply can't give. They want to know when's COVID-19 going to be over, when's life going to get back to normal. I think we all want to know the answer to that. At this point, I don't have an answer. On the vaccines, though, we have been working with the private sector. So if you look at the vaccine team, we do have people seconded from the private sector helping to lead that. We've got people from Fonterra, from the freight and logistics companies. We've got HR professionals in helping us with the workforce needs. They're seconded from the private sector. So the private sector is a big part of our rollout plan here. They are involved in those decisions, and they're playing a really, really important role. We have focused on bringing in that private sector expertise.
Border workers and their families, frontline health workers, who comes next?
So the next group is frontline health workers is where we're starting now. We will have more to say in the coming week. One of the things I understand people have been frustrated about the lack of the more detailed plan moving into the next sort of couple of months. One of the things that slowed us down there have been the negotiations with the pharmaceutical companies. We will have more about that early next week.
But Minister, sorry to interrupt. But why does the order? Why do the dates with which the vaccines are arriving in New Zealand impact the vaccine rollout plan?
Because not all vaccines are as effective with different population groups.
Right.
So, for example, AstraZeneca vaccine, we have seen evidence to suggest that that is not as suitable for the over 65s as the Pfizer vaccine is. So knowing which vaccines are arriving when and where does have an impact on the sequencing of the rollout. And we've been working very hard to lock down those details, and we will have more to say about that early next week. Now that we've locked that down, we will be able to give a lot more certainty.
Okay, I want to compare us with the Australian model here, and this has been available, I think, on the Australian COVID-19 website for about 2 months now. I'm just going to show our viewers at home. I'm sure you're familiar with the Australian vaccine portal. Basically, you can go onto the Australian COVID-19 website and put in a few details about yourself. So you go into this portal, you put in your age, you tell it what state or territory you're living in. They ask if you're working in defence or as a frontline medical worker. They ask if you have any pre-existing conditions. They ask if you're an Indigenous Australian. And then from that information, they're able to tell you what phase you will be vaccinated in. This has been available for 2 months now. Phase 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B. And of course there is some uncertainty as to exactly when the vaccinations will arrive in the country, but people are at the very least able to get a general idea as to when they'll be able to be vaccinated. How long until New Zealand has the same system?
We have taken a different approach to other countries, including Australia, that we have not made specific commitments around vaccines until we know that we've been able to deliver on them. So if you look at the targets Australia set for vaccinations, for example, they haven't been able to meet them because they haven't been able to secure the vaccine supplies. So a big part of our focus has been on making sure that we can match supply and demand, not give people an indication that they're going to be vaccinated by a certain date if we are not able to deliver on that. Now, we'll have more information on the detail of exactly what vaccines we're expecting to arrive and when early next week, and that will give people more certainty about when they can expect to be vaccinated. And we will release a bit more, a lot more of that information about the levels. But one of the things that we've been working through, as I said, is making sure that the sequencing framework lines up with, what we know about vaccine efficacy, what we know about, which vaccines are best, and so on. And so we'll have more about that early next week.
So, to be clear, older populations won't be vaccinated with the AstraZeneca vaccine?
Look, I don't want to preempt that. We will have more information about which vaccines we're going to be using.
That's what you indicated earlier. That was your concern. That's why we haven't had this detail earlier.
Well, that's one of the things we've been weighing out, is which vaccines are most effective. Now, one of the challenges there, Jack, is that the science is still evolving. So the clinical trials for some of the vaccines hasn't been finished yet. And so you want to get that information as reliable as possible before you make those decisions.
Okay. You've talked about developing the world's smartest border. What will that mean?
Well, ultimately, we're always looking at how we can improve our border settings. And as vaccines are rolled out, as vaccines are more available internationally, as we understand what that means in terms of transmissibility of the vaccine, we could actually have quite different border settings to the ones we have now. Not everyone will necessarily need to go through 2 weeks of managed isolation, for example, which is what everybody coming into the country has to do at the moment. As we get to a position where vaccines are part of the global picture, that will probably have an impact on our border. As we can open up safe travel areas with other countries, Australia, the Pacific, we will absolutely be doing that. And we've been working really closely with the Cook Islands in Australia in particular as the first 2 camps off the rank to make sure that we can get those safe travel zones opened up when we can. So all of those things are happening. There's a bit of uncertainty around all of those as well because there's uncertainty around vaccines. But we're working hard to try and give that certainty.
I mean, we're starting to get data from international studies, though, that are reporting on the transmission rates from people who have been vaccinated with the same vaccines that we're going to have in New Zealand, AstraZeneca, and the current Pfizer vaccine. It suggests that transmission rates are dramatically reduced within communities that have been vaccinated. So at what point might we start using vaccine passports to allow people who've been vaccinated into New Zealand?
But New Zealand's actively involved in the conversations around vaccine passports. I think vaccine passports are almost an inevitability at some point in the future, and probably not the not too distant future. I think that's likely to happen. I think there's a lot of water to flow under the bridge very quickly, but I think that vaccine passports are highly likely to be something that people need to get.
What does the not too distant future mean?
I would say within the next year. One of the things around a vaccine passport, of course, is vaccines need to be available to everyone who may need to travel before a vaccine passport could be made a prerequisite, for example. Because you couldn't say to someone you can't travel unless you've had a vaccine if that person couldn't actually get a vaccine.
Does that mean then, Minister, that we will have to have everyone in New Zealand vaccinated before we allow anyone in from overseas who's been vaccinated with the Pfizer or AstraZeneca vaccine?
Not necessarily. One of the things that we need to understand is how that research around transmissibility applies in the New Zealand context. And I say that something that I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand at this point. Those studies are being done in the context of widespread community transmission. So yes, it's reducing transmission within a community where the virus is transmitting, regularly and frequently. And in New Zealand, that's not the context. So our context is we're trying to stop the very rare transmission events. And so we're looking for a different research base to the one that perhaps is currently available now. So our context is quite different. And we look around the world all the time to say, what can we learn from other countries around the world? Very few are in the position that New Zealand's in. So if you look at the research we're doing on transmission of the virus through air conditioning systems, no one else is looking at that because no one else really cares. Because in the context of person-to-person spread being the biggest transmitter, they're not looking at air conditioning systems as we are.
Will the Trans-Tasman bubble be opened this month as you originally planned?
Look, we're talking to Australia at the moment. The key thing is just getting a clear understanding, a clear set of agreements on both sides of the Tasman. We were
working on that for months.
Well, Australia's position changed in the sense that they wanted to reserve the right to close the border at short notice when they wanted to. And so we've been recalibrating to say, well, if that was going to be the new arrangement, if that wasn't what we were originally talking about, then how would we respond to that? And so we had to change our approach because there was a change in approach on the other side of the ditch. And so we've been working to try and make sure we really understand what would happen if there was an outbreak in New Zealand or in Australia.
Finally then, when do you expect to have certainty on that question?
Look, we'll give certainty as soon as we can. It's really going to depend on negotiations across both countries, so we can't necessarily control that. One of the challenges of working with Australia is it's not just the federal government you have to talk to, the state governments as well. And they don't necessarily agree with each other. So that can be a bit of a challenge too.
All right. COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins, thanks once again for your time this morning.
Okay, sounds all good. Sounds like there's some pros to it. Okay. That people coming into the country will be pre-vaccinated, so there's no threat coming through our border. or that everybody here in New Zealand gets vaccinated to protect us from anyone coming in infected with the COVID-19 virus. Okay, anyone slipping through. But then I see the cons of it, like if they're working with the WHO, World Health Organization, etc., seeing this from a conspiracy person's, conspiracy believers' perspective, right? That if this lady I saw on YouTube, supposedly ex-Satanist who escaped it, became a Christian, said, well, the Illuminati want the New World Order in place by 2025 or 2027. What is it now? It's 2021. Got about 4 or 5 years, or 7 at the least, at the most, before they actually do that, right? Before they, finally put it in place on the date that on the year that they want it to be in place, right? So that would be a form of control. Okay, you can't travel anywhere without this COVID-19 be vaccinated, verified passport, right? You can't go outside of the country. You can't go, you can't come from other countries to New Zealand, say, or go from New Zealand to Australia or to America, right? And they should be vaccinated. So yeah, again, that's a form of control. You might not be able to go. I'm pretty sure this is what he was saying. You probably won't be allowed to go to a local restaurant or gym without first being vaccinated, having that vaccination passport. And same with tourists or whatever, right? Yeah, so it could be limiting where you go, yeah? What you do, your entertainment, your nightlife. So you'd basically be trapped in your home, okay, if you didn't get the vaccination. Okay? If you had the vaccination, you'd be free to run around, go to restaurants, movies, whatever, right? Your nightlife. So, would they force everyone to have it? Be subtle by saying, well, it's suggested that you should have it. Come on, maybe if you have a job or you go to sign up for a job, they say, well, you have to get the vaccination before we can give you the job. As they do with drug tests, your own test to see if you've been taking anything at home, or on the job, that sort of thing, right? Those random drug tests. So could it be a way to, again, to control everybody, limit everybody? I don't know if this would happen, but in Canada, around that area, with David Lynn, their pastor, I've seen some videos of him from about 2015 being booted out of a place that they'd rented for their church, for the church service to gather and praise God and all that sort of stuff, because of a suspected involvement in something else that went down somewhere else, right? All this sort of stuff, right? The landlord kicked them out because he assumed that they'd done this, they'd done that, right? When they hadn't. Later on, I guess they had their new church premises, and but being banned, being hassled by LGBTQ people like that on the street. All he's doing is preaching, right? That's what he wants to do, but he's been called a hate monger and accused of his church organisation being involved in some other scuffle where a guy got his leg broken because he was trying to take the speaker off another priest, another street preacher, right? Unfortunately, he fell over and broke his leg, and they're all pointing a finger, saying that he was there. It was his group that did it, when it wasn't, and all these other accusations, right, through these court system and LGBTQ and all those sort of things, all these false accusations. So could they be like heading towards that? You know? Yeah, it's kind of a tough one. I guess you can only like wait and see, you know? Hear these conspiracy theories, but yeah, they're just basically theories until you actually see it all happening, coming into place, you know? And it's all evident out there. That's what's going down, because they've got a hidden agenda, or hidden motives, hidden agenda. Okay. Yeah, like, you know, like saying to you can't preach on the street because you need a busker's license when it's got nothing to do with being a busker. A busker and a proselyter or a teacher preacher is a completely different thing. It's a way for that city council to get you to pay for some sort of permit that you didn't really need to buy. You know, like I had one clown who on the streets of Auckland Street, Queen, came up and says I couldn't film outside McDonald's because I was part of a film course right down there, not far from it. But I says, well, if you notice that the lens cap is on, I'm not filming, I'm just like, you know, checking the camera or whatever, or setting it up to film, right? It's up in the air. And he reckons, oh, you can't do it because I'm the manager or this sort of stuff. But I noticed he didn't have a manager uniform on. It was just a plain black, you know, McDonald's outfit, whatever it was at the time. So part of this movie that I was doing about aliens coming to Earth, and one saw McDonald's, and you know, McDonald's is supposed to be universal. It really means it's worldly, you know, around the world, known around the world. But universal, I sort of like twisted it and says, yeah, well, you know, throughout the universe, all alien life know about McDonald's, right? So I went in there, being the cheeky sod I am. I saw a manager, right, in a blue uniform, obviously. He had a manager on his label, walking around, you know, giving the orders. So I says, oh, excuse me, yes, I might want to apply for a job, I'd like to speak to the manager. And he goes, oh, I'm the manager. I says, no, you're not. He goes, yes, I am. He says, no, you're not. And you keep saying that. He says, well, I've got the badge, you know, saying his name and then he's a manager. I says, no, that's phony. Yeah, as I said, being a cheeky sod, right? Playing the game there. I says, no, you're not the manager. And he goes, okay, so why are you saying this? And I says, well, because that guy over there, and this guy was tending the fries or something like that, he said he's the manager, right? I was outside fixing the camera because we're doing a film on the street, you know, part of the requirement of this film course I was doing. And he started hassling me and says, oh, you know, I can't film outside the entrance, you know, even though the lens cap was on and it was pointed up in the air, because he was the manager. Just so he says, oh, which one? And I pointed him up. Says, that guy there doing the fries. So whatever. He's the manager. So he goes, is that right? Well, I guess today's his lucky day. He can go manage and clean the toilets, you know. So he told this guy basically that. Yeah. And you got this. I met this other guy on Queen Street one time. He was down and out. His woman. I befriended him and his woman. His woman was working at a strip club or something, and she came out. She got squashed between a parked vehicle and a courier van or something. Broke both her legs and all that sort of stuff. And I guess he was really smitten by her or whatever. And he was like, you know, an English guy I befriended. And he was all out for her, you know. So he's holding up the sign, please give me money to feed my best friend, his woman friend, right? And myself, or mainly for her, right? And this clown comes up and goes, oh, you can't hold that sign up, so give him assholes, right? This clown dressed up in a, it's with the city council, Auckland City Council, I guess, with this woman, right? And he comes up and starts asking this guy, give me that sign. And he's like, no. So I happen to walk along and go, oh, you know, I can't remember his name, it was Jeff or something like that. How you doing, yeah? You alright? What's going on? So I'm trying to get some money for some food, because he's on the street, him and his woman, right? And this guy's hassling him, and he says, give me the sign. He's like, tell him to get lost, you know. You can, you can do that. You don't need no busker's license or whatever. You're not hurting anyone. You're just trying to generate some money so you can have something to eat. Basic human rights, right? But this guy's like, well, who are you? And I go, who are you? He goes, oh, I'm the council, you know, like he's the boss of it. Like he's nothing, you know. He's just a walker up and down the street with some lady trying to impress this lady. And he starts getting smart to me. He says, oh, get lost, so I'll call the cops. So I was like, whatever, pal. And I took off anyway because the cops came, you know, coming in. yeah, they're like a-holes. At times I just couldn't be bothered with them. But it's just, yeah, you can't even, like, you know, you got no basic rights. You just want something to eat because you're starving, and some ding dong thinking he's got the authority, the power, that he's someone when he's nothing, yeah, is stopping you from those basic rights. Yeah, get a couple of dollars to have a feed and feed the one you're in love with, you know, that sort of crap. Yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, I'm weighing up the pros and the cons of this. You know, you don't really know until you visually see, you know, you see the evidence and you realise what's really going on. So, if you like this video, you please subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to ring that bell so you won't miss out on any of our extraordinary, bizarre, crazy, loony, funny ass videos from Real Juicy News. And give us a thumbs up, add your comments below, and then go tell all your friends, you know, what might be going down, and that you heard it first on Real Juicy News.